They didn't know I was still awake. That's the only reason I heard it. Through the thin crack of the bedroom door, her whisper, my daughter-in-law, Sarah, curled like smoke into the hallway. Tomorrow we'll lock him away. Calm, casual, as if she were talking about putting a tool back in the shed, not her husband's 78-year-old father. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, my hands pressed flat against my thighs. My suitcase was already half packed. I'd started folding clothes after dinner. Not because I'd planned to run, not yet, but because something in the air told me I should be ready. 2 months ago, I moved into my son Andrew's house. My little workshop and home had become too much to manage after the hip surgery, and Andrew said, "You'll be better off here, Dad. We'll take care of you." I believed him. I sold the house. I wired the money to his account. He said he'd invest it for me, and I didn't ask questions. I wanted to believe he loved me enough to make room for me, but love isn't measured in spare bedrooms and promises. It's in tone, in patience, in whether your coffee cup is refilled at the table, or whether someone sighs when you ask for a piece of toast. Tonight, I had dinner alone in the kitchen. Sarah said they were going out just for an hour and left me with leftovers in plastic containers. I didn't mind the solitude. I minded the way she glanced at her watch when I asked how her day was, as if even a few seconds of conversation with me were an interruption. I stayed in the room until I heard them head upstairs. It was when I was getting ready for bed, the door slightly opened to let the small dog slip in, that I heard it. Her voice, that poisonous whisper. "He's getting slower," Sarah said. And he asked about the funds again. "We'll handle it tomorrow," quietly. I stood frozen for a long time, long after their footsteps faded into the master bedroom. Then I moved quietly, methodically. I closed the door, locked it, and pulled the suitcase out from under the bed. I didn't cry. I don't cry easily. Not anymore. But my hands trembled as I folded my favorite fishing vest. The old tweed one with worn pockets that Andrew always said made me look too old. I added my papers, passport, the envelope with my medical records, and the folder I wasn't supposed to find last week in Andrew's desk drawer, labeled with my name. The clock said 12:43 a.m. I wasn't sure where I'd go. I had no plan, just one instinct: leave before they made that whisper real. Outside, the street was quiet. The neighborhood was too polished. Identical houses, immaculate lawns, sidewalks without cracks. I didn't belong here, I never had. I opened the front door without a sound. Slip-on shoes in one hand, suitcase in the other. I didn't leave a note. What could I possibly write? "Thank you for the hospitality." I paused just once at the end of the walkway, looking back at the house where my son lived, where my name was no longer welcome at the table. Then I turned, stepped onto the street, and walked toward whatever would come next. The suitcase felt heavier with every step, not from weight, but from the shame packed into it. I didn't know where I was walking to. I just knew I couldn't stay. The bus stop was 2 blocks down. I walked barefoot, shoes still in my hand. The pavement was cool from the night air, and the silence pressed against my skin like a second coat. I passed 3 houses before a motion sensor clicked on and bathed me in light. I paused, caught like a thief in someone else's security, and for a second I wanted to turn back. Just knock on the door. Say it was a mistake. Say I was tired and misunderstood what I'd heard, but I hadn't misunderstood. The whisper had been clear: "Tomorrow we'll lock him away." And the silence that followed had been even louder. Andrew hadn't objected, not one word. "No, that's too much. No, he's my father." Not even a sigh of discomfort, just silence. A silence that said, "Fine." I sat on the metal bench at the corner of Cypress and Maple. The last bus would be coming in 12 minutes if the schedule was still the same. I hadn't taken public transportation since before the surgery, since before I handed over the last piece of independence I had and moved into a house where I didn't belong. I slipped my shoes on and zipped up my coat. Not for warmth. It was early fall and the night was gentle, but for the feeling of being enclosed, held together. I glanced at the hidden envelope in my bag. A week ago, I'd been looking for spare fuses in the garage drawer. Instead, I found a thick white envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. Inside were copies of forms I didn't recognize at first. A power of attorney I'd never signed. Financial withdrawals, transfers, insurance claims. My signature at the bottom of each, but it wasn't mine. Not quite. Close enough, though, for someone who wanted it to be convincing. Close enough for a bank clerk in a rush or a notary who didn't ask questions. The handwriting mimicked my loops and spacing, but the slant was wrong. A practiced imitation. I'd folded the documents back inside and returned them without a sound. The whisper I heard tonight wasn't a beginning. It was the final line in a plan that had been unfolding for months. The bus came. I stood, pulled my bag behind me, and climbed aboard. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s, barely glanced at me. "Anywhere in particular?" he asked. "Just downtown," I said. "Near the old square." He nodded. "You're out late." I didn't answer. I watched the empty streets blur into each other as the bus hummed forward. Street lights flashed across the windows in rhythm. Each flash a thought he knew she forged. They wanted me gone. 20 minutes later, I stepped off in a part of town I hadn't been to in years. I wandered until I found a small motor lodge tucked between a gas station and a 24-hour diner. The woman behind the counter barely looked up when I said, "One night." The room was small, clean enough. It smelled of bleach and something older, something permanent. I locked the door behind me and set the suitcase on the chair. Only then did I let myself exhale fully. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the phone in my hand. No missed calls, no messages. Of course not. They hadn't noticed yet, or they had and decided not to ask where I'd gone. The worst part wasn't the whisper. It wasn't even the forged signature or the fake smiles. It was the knowing, the certainty that at some point in the past year, I'd stopped being a father to Andrew. I'd become an account, a signature, a room that cost more than it gave. A burden. I took off my shoes and lay back on the bed, fully dressed. I wasn't afraid. Not yet. That would come later. Tonight I was just tired, but tomorrow I'd begin. I didn't sleep much. The motel sheets were stiff, and the hum of the fridge sounded like a distant train, never stopping, always pushing forward. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying everything. Her whisper, the envelope, the way Andrew avoided my eyes at dinner. I'd never meant to be a problem. I got up before the sun rose and made tea with the motel's rusty little kettle. It tasted metallic, but it was hot, and I needed something to hold. The quiet in this room was different from the quiet in their house. There, it had been watchful, waiting to correct me. Here, it was just silence. No judgment, just stillness. I opened my suitcase to change and paused again at the envelope. I hadn't dared open it again last night, but this morning I needed to see it. I needed to know what exactly they'd taken. The papers were neat, clipped together, copies, not originals. There were 3 main documents. One was a general power of attorney authorizing Andrew to act on my behalf in financial and legal matters, including banking, property, and medical decisions. Signed in my name, witnessed, even notarized. The signature was good, not perfect, but close. I'd seen it before. The same slight curve, the same forced neatness. It was the signature of a son who had stopped loving his father and started stealing from him instead. Would you like me to continue the story? Perhaps focusing on what the grandfather plans to do next with the forged documents. The second document was a transaction history from Andrew's investment account. Multiple transfers from an account labeled with my old address, the one linked to the sale of my cottage. $180,000 gone in 4 months. Not a single call to ask if I needed anything. Not a word. The third was a draft application for an assisted living facility. My name typed neatly at the top. Age, medical conditions, mobility notes. One line stood out, bolded. Patient demonstrates early signs of cognitive decline. That's what Sarah said last week when I couldn't find the keys. Maybe it's time to get your memory checked, Dad. She'd said it sweetly, with a hand on my shoulder. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. Apparently, it wasn't. I folded the papers back slowly. My hands were steady now. I was done being shocked. Done giving the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want revenge. Not really. What I wanted was mine. My name, my choices, my voice. I'd spent decades raising a boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, who cried the first time his dog died. I didn't know when that boy became a man who saw me as disposable, but I wasn't going to ask for his love anymore. Some things, once broken, don't come back. At 8, I called a cab. The driver was young, polite, and didn't ask questions when I said, "Take me to Fairmont Bank downtown branch." I sat in the back, clutching my bag like a lifeline. It was the same bank where Andrew used to bring me to sign documents. I always let him talk to the tellers, I thought. He explained things better. The woman at the front desk had a name tag that read Marcy. She smiled, then faltered when she saw my face. "I'd like to speak with a manager," I said. "It's regarding power of attorney and financial oversight." A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit appeared, mid-30s, clean-shaven, with tired eyes. "Mr. Jordan," he said, "I'm David. Let's go to my office." Inside, I handed him the envelope. I didn't explain, just waited while he flipped through the pages. After a long pause, he looked up. "Did you sign this power of attorney?" "No." "Do you recall authorizing these transfers?" "No." "Has anyone accessed your accounts on your behalf recently?" "My son, Andrew Jordan." He nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Jordan, this is serious. Forging a signature on a legal document is a felony, and if these funds were moved without your knowledge, we'll need to open an internal investigation." "I'm not here to press charges," I said. "Not yet. I'm here to stop everything right now." David leaned forward. "You want to revoke this power of attorney?" "Yes, today, and freeze any access he has to your accounts, everything. Cancel automatic payments, shut down shared access, and I'd like to move the remaining funds to—" I took a breath. I hadn't decided this part until that moment, but suddenly it was clear. "To a new account in my name only." David nodded. "We can absolutely do that." We spent the next hour reviewing everything. Every payment Andrew had authorized, every form Sarah had notarized through a friend. It wasn't just theft, it was erasure. Quiet, polite erasure. By the time I left the bank, it was almost noon. My feet ached, my back protested, but I stood taller. This was the first day in months I belonged to myself. I walked for blocks slowly until I found a bench tucked under an old elm tree across from a public park. I sat the suitcase beside me. I didn't feel sad. What I felt was a hollow sort of clarity, the kind you get when the noise dies down and all that's left is the truth. It wasn't about the money. It was about being erased. They thought I was fading, easy to move, easy to silence. And maybe I had started to believe that too until last night. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up with Andrew's name. I let it ring until it stopped. Then came the message, "Dad, where are you? Please call me." I didn't answer. I didn't owe him that. A few minutes later, another message appeared, this time from Sarah. "We woke up and your room was empty. This is really unfair. You're scaring the kids." I stared at that one longer. Scaring the kids. They hadn't said 10 words to me in the last month. No, Sarah was scared. Scared that her nice little plan was crumbling. Scared that the old man she meant to lock away had slipped out the front door with a suitcase and a secret. Good. Let her be scared. I closed the messages without responding. I knew who I needed to see. There was a name on a card David, the bank manager, had given me, a lawyer. Her office was 6 blocks away. I pulled my suitcase along behind me. The receptionist was young. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but David from Fairmont Bank told me to come." A few minutes later, a woman in her early 40s came out. Tailored jacket, soft gray eyes, she extended her hand. "Mr. Jordan, I'm Elise Becker. David called, come with me." We sat in a private office. I opened the envelope one more time. Elise read through everything slowly, her eyes narrowing. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "I'm so sorry. This happens more often than people think, especially to older men who trust too easily." "I didn't think I was being naive," I said quietly. "Just hopeful." "You weren't naive," she said. "You were loving and they took advantage." She used words like fraud, financial exploitation, elder abuse. I nodded through them, though they sounded like someone else's life. I wasn't ready to talk about court, but I did want protection. I want a new will, I said. I want everything rewritten. She didn't blink. We can do that. And I want to transfer financial power to someone else, not my son. Do you have someone in mind? I thought of Clara, my niece in Arizona. Kind, reliable. She'd sent birthday cards every year. She'd visited after my surgery, brought soup and magazines, and didn't ask about money. Yes, I said, I'll call her. For the first time since the motel room, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly, but footing. I was still standing. When I left her office, my phone had 4 missed calls, all from Andrew and 1 voicemail. I didn't listen. Instead, I turned the phone off. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence for once. Let them feel what it's like to wait for a call that never comes. I found a bench near the train station and sat down. I opened my bag and felt the edge of the envelope again. My hand brushed the contents I already knew by heart, but there was something else tucked behind them. A second envelope, sealed, heavier. I didn't remember packing it. I opened it slowly. Inside, more forms, property records, loan applications. One was a refinance agreement on my old house, dated just 2 weeks after I moved in with Andrew and Sarah. I stared at it. The house hadn't been sold once. It had been sold twice. Andrew had forged a second transfer to take out equity after the first sale. But the worst part was the note paperclip to the back, in Sarah's small, perfect handwriting. Make sure he doesn't see mail from Ridgeway Title. Redirect notices starting next week. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd planned to drain every last trace of my life before handing me over to a facility and walking away clean. I folded the papers slowly, hand steady. So that was the plan. Sell the house, take the money, forge the signature, refinance again, lock me up. Smile for Christmas cards, but I wasn't confused. I wasn't lost. I was angry. Not the loud kind. The kind that sits low in the belly and waits. That sharpens itself on silence and time. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I walked until my legs ached, then checked into a modest bed and breakfast a few blocks from the courthouse. The room was small but warm. A patchwork quilt on the bed. It felt like a place where someone could rest and still feel real. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No dreams, no footsteps outside my door, no whispers. In the morning, I called the bank. David answered on the second ring. "Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice already tense. "We've flagged several more transactions. One of them was attempted just this morning. A transfer of $12,000 to a private contractor. I want it blocked," I said calmly. "We already froze it, but he may try again. I assume he already has." "Keep everything stopped," I said. "Every transfer, every link. I want a printout. Everything Andrew or Sarah touched, all of it." By 10, I was back at the bank. David handed me the folder himself, face grim. "This is everything from the last 18 months," he said. "The amount moved is significant." I sat in the small private room and began reading, page after page. Withdrawals labeled home maintenance, but I hadn't lived in a house that needed fixing. Medical expenses, but I'd never seen those doctors. Investment transfers into Andrew's name, and the slow bleed of automatic transfers. I had been paying for the house I no longer owned, for their groceries, for their vacations. One line made my hand go cold. Tuition, Grandview Academy, annual. That was Sarah's niece's school, not even family. "I want all of this stopped," I said. "It's already done," he assured me. He left, and when he returned, he had a card in his hand. "One more thing," he said. "There's a support organization for older adults who have gone through situations like this. It's confidential." I took the card. "Thank you," I said. "I might call." That afternoon I did. Not because I needed a therapist, but because I needed a witness. Someone to say, "Yes, this happened," and "No, you weren't crazy." The woman who answered, Patris, spoke gently. She just said, "You're not alone." Patris met me the next morning at a small community center. Her office was simple. "I don't want therapy," I said before she could start. I'm not here to vent. I just want to make sure no one ever puts me in this position again. That's exactly what we'll do. She connected me with a legal partner named Ruth. Tell me what you want, Ruth said. Not what happened, just what you need moving forward. It was the first time anyone had asked me that without condescension. I want a new will, I said. Everything rewritten. My son and his wife removed entirely. Done. I want my financial power of attorney reassigned to my niece, Clara, and a living will. No one should be able to make decisions about my care but me. Ruth looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. You're the kind of client we don't see often, she said. Most men come to us in pieces. You came already whole, bruised, but whole. I didn't answer. I just wanted it clean, signed, filed. When she finished, she handed me a new folder. Everything will be official by end of week. Until then, no one can touch anything. And if they try, you call me. I stepped outside, holding the folder like it was made of glass. I was no longer the man who waited in his room to be told what came next. I was deciding now, and they would live with that. I hadn't called Irene in over a decade. We used to talk weekly back when our wives were still alive. But that afternoon, as I sat alone in the bed and breakfast with the folder from Ruth in my lap, I dialed her number from memory. She picked up on the second ring. Hello, I knew her voice immediately. It was lower now, slower, but it still carried that old edge like she'd always just finished telling someone off. Irene, I said, my voice breaking just a little. It's May. A pause. And then a burst of recognition. May Jordan, Lord have mercy, where have you been? I left, I said. Left Andrew's house. I needed to disappear just for a bit. Another pause, this one different, not surprise, but something more careful. Is everything all right? No, I said honestly, but I think it will be. She didn't ask questions, just said, you have somewhere to sleep tonight. Yes, tomorrow, I don't know. You do now, I'm still in Newport. Got an extra bedroom, the one with the green quilt you hated. Come stay. I'm not asking, I'm telling. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Thank you. Pack your things, she said. I'll have soup waiting. The bus ride to Newport took 3 hours. I dozed through half of it, the folder clutched to my chest like a passport. When I got off, Irene was already waiting at the station, shorter than I remembered, but her eyes as sharp as ever. She didn't hug me right away. You're thinner, she said, and tired. Come on, we'll talk over tea. Her house was small but filled with life. Photos everywhere, old records in the corner, a cat that hissed at my suitcase and then disappeared under the couch. She made soup like she always had, heavy on the garlic. No apologies. When we finally sat at the kitchen table, she poured 2 mugs of tea and waited. I told her everything. From the moment I moved in with Andrew to the forged papers to the whisper in the hallway. I told her about the bank, the lawyer, the second envelope. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, she leaned back, folding her arms. Damn, I smiled despite myself. And here I thought my son's wife was the queen of cruelty, she added. Yours sounds like she could teach a course. It's not just her, I said. Andrew let it happen. He watched it happen. That's what breaks me, Irene nodded. Oh, honey, we raise them to stand tall and they grow up thinking we're the floor. The silence settled in again. Not sad, just full of things we had both lived and never said aloud. You're staying as long as you need, she said. I mean it. And if you want quiet, I'll give you quiet. If you want to scream into the sea, I'll hold your coat. I laughed. A real laugh. The first one in longer than I could remember. That night she gave me the room with the green quilt after all. And as I lay in bed, listening to the waves through the cracked window, I felt something unfamiliar return to my chest. Not safety, not yet, but something close. The phone started ringing just after 8 the next morning. I let it vibrate once, then turned it face down on the nightstand and walked out to the porch. Let me guess, Irene said without looking at me. Your ghost just realized it's missing. The ocean was calm that morning. The phone rang again, then again, 6 times in the next hour. All Andrew. No voicemail, just the name flashing as if urgency could erase what he'd done. He's not worried about you, Irene said. He's worried about whatever access you've taken with you. I nodded. I already knew. Later that morning, I turned the phone on silent. Messages began to stack. "Dad, please call me. We're worried." "Where are you?" "Sarah's panicking." "I need to talk to you right now." "This has gone too far." Each word read like a script. I watched them appear without feeling much. Instead, I went into the kitchen and helped Irene chop vegetables for lunch. Between the soft thuds of the knife and the hiss of boiling water, she asked, "Do you want to tell Clara what's happening about the legal papers?" "I will," I said, "when it's time, and the rest of them. I'm done talking to people who only listen when they need something." My phone buzzed on the table. That afternoon, a new message appeared. This one from Sarah. "This is getting out of hand. If you don't return Andrew's calls, we'll have to take other steps. You can't just disappear like this. People are asking questions." I reread it 3 times. That was her worry, not me, just appearances. People are asking questions. I almost laughed. They had told themselves for so long that I was fading, slipping, losing control. And now they were the ones chasing ghosts, dialing silence. That night, I walked down to the beach with Irene. "I never thought I'd be 78, I said finally, "and still figuring out how to leave people behind." "That's how you know you're still alive," she said, "when you're still willing to walk away." Back at the house, I charged my phone and opened the messages again. 15 from Andrew, 9 from Sarah, 2 from a number I didn't recognize. I scrolled to the very bottom and saw one I hadn't expected. "Grandpa, it's Lucas. Are you okay? My grandson." I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off the phone again. Not because I didn't care, but because for once I would answer on my own time. The letter arrived 2 days later. A real one. Envelope, stamp, even her handwriting on the front. Irene brought it in, eyebrows raised. "You sure you want to open that?" "I'm sure," I said. "I want to see how she spins it." I sat at the kitchen table and slid it open with a butter knife. The paper was thick, expensive. "May, I hope you're safe and comfortable wherever you are. We've all been deeply concerned about you. Andrew hasn't been able to sleep. The children are asking questions. We're trying to hold everything together in your absence. I won't pretend to understand why you left the way you did, or why you've refused to respond to Andrew's calls. I'm sure you have your reasons, though from where we sit it feels disproportionate. Unkind." "Unkind," I said aloud, the words sounding ridiculous in the quiet kitchen. I read on. "We've always tried to support you in every way we could, opening our home, managing your affairs during your recovery. It hasn't been easy balancing everything, but we did it out of love, not obligation. I hope you haven't forgotten that. Now, however, things have become complicated. The accounts are locked. Services are disrupted. Andrew is being contacted by banks, by vendors, by people who don't understand what's going on. It's putting enormous pressure on the family. This isn't what anyone wanted. We're still willing to talk to make things right, but we can't do that while you remain unreachable. You're part of this family, May, and families don't run away from each other." No signature, just her name printed cleanly at the bottom. "Sarah." I folded the letter slowly. Irene was watching me. "Well?" she asked. I shook my head. "She's not even angry. That's the worst part. She still thinks she's the reasonable one." "They always do," Irene muttered. It didn't hurt. Reading her words, so carefully chosen, so polite on the surface, was like seeing a costume on a hanger. There was no real shape behind it, just posture. I pushed the letter aside. Unkind. As if I'd snapped at someone over dinner. As if I hadn't watched them siphon away the bones of my life bit by bit. The next morning, I wrote no reply. I made breakfast instead. I let them talk. I let them wonder. I was no longer the man who waited in his room. I had no more to say, and that finally was enough. I met her by accident. I was coming out of the corner store when I saw her drop a stack of folders in the parking lot. Papers scattered in the wind. I didn't think. I just moved. "Thank you, God. Thank you," she said. She was young, mid-30s. Her jacket had a patch, North Coast Community Services. She looked at my face, paused, and her smile softened. "Wait, are you May Jordan?" "Yes," I said carefully. "I thought so. Patris mentioned you from Elder Services. I'm Leah. I actually read your intake report last week. You're kind of famous in our office right now. I laughed despite myself. That's never a good sentence. No, seriously. Most people in your position stay quiet. You didn't. You drew a line. It was either that or vanish, I said. Leah pulled out a folded piece of paper. I probably shouldn't be mixing business and groceries, she said, but I have a unit, safe housing. 1 bedroom, no stairs, quiet building, no rent, utilities covered. You'd have privacy, freedom, and no strings. She shook her head. Just one. You check in with me once a week. Not because I don't trust you, just so you're not alone. I took the paper. I'll think about it. 2 days later, I moved in. Small kitchen, older carpet, a window that stuck, but it was mine. I unpacked my suitcase slowly. Each folded sweater, each pair of socks felt like it had earned the right to be there. Leah came by the next morning with fresh towels and 2 mugs. We sat for a while. She didn't pry. When she left, she said, "You don't owe anyone an answer, but you deserve to ask yourself what you want now, not what you'll tolerate, what you want." That night, I stood at the window in my new apartment. No one was watching me. No one had access to my drawers or my name or my future. For the first time in years, I felt unclaimed, and I liked it. The library was 6 blocks away. I found it one afternoon, walking without purpose. Inside, it smelled like paper and dust and old polish. The woman at the front desk, Judith, looked up. "You lost or just quiet?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. "Mostly." "Same." I started volunteering. Shelving large print novels. Reading aloud on Thursdays. No one asked about my past. I liked it that way. The rhythm of the days returned. Wake early, open the blinds to the sound of gulls, walk to the library. I had learned how to belong to myself. One afternoon, Judith handed me a stack of flyers. "Community talk next week," she said. "Elder advocacy, you should come." "I've had enough of talking," I said. "Not for you," she replied. "For them, you'd be surprised who listens when the right person stands up." I folded the flyer into my coat pocket. I sat at my little kitchen table and thought about what Leah said. What I wanted, maybe more than anything, was not to vanish, not into their silence. I wanted to be useful, seen but not controlled, free but not forgotten. It was a Wednesday when I looked up and saw him standing just inside the doors. Lucas, my grandson. He was taller now, still just a boy in some ways, but the kind of boy who was learning to carry things quietly. He wore a navy jacket too thin for the season. I froze. Judith leaned in. "Want me to send him off?" "No," I said softly. "Let's see if he came as himself or as their messenger." Lucas walked over, slow, uncertain. "Hi," he said. "Hi. I saw your name on the volunteer board online," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't know where else to find you." "Do your parents know you're here?" I asked. "No, you tell them if you want to, but I'm not calling anyone." He looked down. "I didn't come to defend them. I don't even know everything they did, but I know you left, and I know it was bad, and I think," he looked up, eyes a little red, "I think I should have asked more before." "You were a child," I said. "It wasn't your job." "Still," he said, "you were always kind to me. I should have at least said goodbye." I reached across the table, not quickly, and laid my hand gently over his. He let it stay. "They told me you were tired, that you needed space, that you were confused sometimes." "I don't know how much they took," he said, "but I know how they talk when they think no one's listening. And I remember how you looked at dinner sometimes, like you were underwater." That was the truest thing anyone had said to me in months. "You don't have to choose sides, Lucas," I said. "You just have to choose what kind of man you want to be." "I'm trying," he said. "I believe you." Eventually he stood. Just before he reached the door, he turned back. "Can I come again, just a visit?" "Yes," I said. "If you come as yourself." He nodded. Then he left. I sat back down, the afternoon light slanting across the room. For the first time since I'd walked out of that house, I felt something open in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The letter came in a white envelope with a firm black logo, Sullivan and Crane, LLP. I made tea first, sat by the window with the envelope in front of me. Letters like that always are quiet. The real noise comes after. I opened it with a butter knife. The letter inside was 5 paragraphs long, signed in blue ink. The letter came in a white envelope with a firm black logo, Sullivan and Crane LLP. I didn't open it right away. Letters like that always are quiet. The real noise comes after. I opened it with a butter knife. The letter inside was 5 paragraphs long, signed in blue ink. Dear Mr. Jordan, we are writing on behalf of our clients, Mr. Andrew Jordan and Mrs. Sarah Jordan, regarding recent actions taken involving shared financial accounts, property, and legal responsibilities. Our clients have expressed concern over the abrupt nature of your departure, your decision to block account access without prior notice, and the potential legal ramifications of these actions. They are particularly troubled by the absence of communication and the emotional distress these changes have caused to the family, including minor dependents. I stopped there. Minor dependents, I said aloud. They're 11 and 14, not orphans. I kept reading. Our clients are open to resolving the situation amicably and suggest a mediated conversation with legal counsel present to discuss a path forward that is respectful to all parties. Should this invitation be declined, we may be forced to explore legal avenues to ensure proper accounting and access regarding shared financial and family matters. We trust that you will act in good faith and respond within 14 days of receipt of this letter. It ended without warmth, just a signature and a deadline. I folded the paper slowly. The tea had gone cold. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Ruth in her office again. She read the letter silently, her pen tapping once against the folder on her desk. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm not surprised, no. But I'd hoped they'd at least pretend to apologize." I shrugged. "They did in their own way. They're sorry I woke up." Ruth didn't smile. "This letter isn't a real threat. It's a push, an attempt to intimidate you into backing down, into giving them a seat at the table again." "They don't get a seat anymore." "Good," she said, "because you have every legal right to protect your assets. Everything we've done is above board. If they want mediation, we can say no. This is a bluff. They don't want court. They want silence." "Well," I said, leaning back, "they can have silence, just not on their terms." Ruth pulled a form from the drawer. "Just in case," she said, "statement of intent. If you want, I can file this preemptively. Makes your current standing harder to challenge." I signed it without hesitation. No flinching. Andrew wasn't in the room anymore. Not in my thoughts, not in my decisions. "They're not used to the version of you who says no," Ruth said. "I'm still getting used to her myself. You're doing fine." As I left her office, I walked slower than usual. Not from age, but from certainty. I was no longer acting from fear, no longer reacting. I had already left the house, already reclaimed my name, already built a room of my own. Now I was simply closing the doors behind me. The days are quieter now. Not empty, just quiet in a way that feels earned. I still see Leia once a week. She brings muffins or paperwork and we talk about ordinary things. Tenant meetings, her dog's ruined couch. She never asks about Andrew. That silence, too, feels like respect. Lucas visits sometimes, never with warning. He brings a book or a pastry or nothing at all. The last time he came, he asked if I remembered the story I used to tell him about the man who ran away and found a home in the forest. "I always thought that was made up," he said. "It was," I told him, "but I didn't know then how much truth a made-up story can hold." Ruth still checks in. She told me last week that Andrew and Sarah haven't filed anything. Their lawyer's silence is louder than any letter they could send. I'm not waiting for another envelope. I'm not waiting for an apology that will never come. That was the old me, the version who thought love was proven by patience, by staying even when it hurt. But I've learned that staying and disappearing can look the same from the outside, and I will not vanish again. There's power in refusal. Not the loud kind, but the still kind. The kind that says, "You do not get to define me anymore. You do not get to rewrite the story and leave me as a footnote." I don't hate them. What I feel is more like distance. The kind that no lawyer or invitation to a holiday dinner can close. And that's all right. Some people lose you slowly. Others lose you all at once, in the middle of the night, with nothing but a suitcase and a folded envelope of truth. They don't always notice the moment it happens, but they always feel the absence. Irene calls from time to time. "We're old, May," she says, "but God, we've earned it." I think about that a lot. What it means to age, not just in body, but in clarity. To choose peace over performance. To choose yourself for once without apology. I won't end this by telling you it all got better. That's not how life works. But I can tell you this. I am not afraid of the quiet anymore. I do not belong to those who tried to control me. And if you're listening to this and it feels familiar, if something in you knows the sound of a locked drawer or a paper signed in your name, know this too. You are not too old to walk away, and they are not too powerful to stop you. You're allowed to leave even if it's late, especially if it's late. And when you do, don't forget to leave the door open for yourself on the way out. You might be surprised who's waiting there. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever left quietly or wanted to, leave a comment below. You're not alone.